So let me first introduce myself before I continue talking. My name is Carolin Gomulia and I founded the transformation and development agency, the Workroom, 2 years ago. And at the Workroom, we kind of roll up our sleeves and co-create and walk the path with organizations in order for them to thrive. So I help organizations with strategy design, resource mobilization, and organizational development, and basically anything that make an organization effective, efficient, and thrive. I've worked with organization youth development, peace building, wildlife conservation, so a really wide spectrum of organizations. My passion is to work on real change, and I like to push boundaries and to think upside down and inside out and to challenge conventional development paradigms. So that's what I really love doing. And I hope that during today's session, we can also do that a little bit. The title of the session is Leading in Times of Uncertainty, Adaptive and Agile Management Practices for NPOs. So let's see how far we get. The session will first be a presentation, then I will introduce my guest speaker, Kaashifah Beukes, and we'll have a conversation about leading in time of uncertainty. And then we have time, hopefully a little bit of time for Q&A. So leading in time of uncertainty, I mean, we all have been hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's hear from you, pop it in the chat. What has been one of the major disruptions that COVID-19 caused for your organization? Just type a word, just a short description. What was the really major disruption that happened because of COVID-19? Yeah, just pop it in the chat. Okay. Oops. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Okay. Yeah, so there have been major disruptions. I mean, obviously the first one is has always been around moving offices, but then there are many other disruptions. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, so let's move on. So yeah, so COVID-19 has been a major disruption, and half year into the crisis, what can we actually take from it? So it doesn't feel anymore like a crisis, it feels like an ongoing crisis. It doesn't seem to end. Even as the restrictions are eased. So what I've tried to do with my presentation, I've put together 6 points, main points that I think are important in leading in times of uncertainty. And I've taken that from working with organizations during this time and also times before where organizations had to face major crises. So let's start. So the first point I think that I want to make is it's important to show empathy and self-care. And that's a point that has been made often now in COVID-19, but is often kind of the last point on the agenda. And I wanted to make it first because as some that attended this morning, the Authentic Resilience session also heard, this is a long haul. It's not something that you can just shake off or sit through. So for leaders, it's really important to practice self-care from the beginning, show empathy and allow empathy. So also you as a leader need to show that you actually sometimes need care, and you need that virtual hug that we currently only can get. You need the kind words and talk about mental health and well-being. So I know that many organizations in this crisis have offered counseling services to their staff. It's a very important topic, and it's still often, unfortunately, linked to stigma, and people don't like talking about it. But I think the more as leaders we talk about it, the more people will also become comfortable with it. Encourage participation. So I know that's actually not something that has anything to do with leading in time of uncertainty, but I think it's such a vital point as leadership of an organization. So creation of a work environment where people are challenged and invited to be involved. And I think in crisis, because as leaders, we have to then run around, we forget, that there are people actually sitting kind of virtually on the benches, and how can we involve them and still keep them challenged to be part of the organization. And a good way of doing that is give everyone a chance to be part of the solution, because you'll need lots of solution seeking in this time. What are the opportunities in this crisis? So one of the things that I found in working with NGOs, or not just NGOs, also in businesses, is always this topic of how can we break down silos, how can we work together. So the leading a crisis is a good opportunity to do that, because you can build teams that are centered around around a certain topic, and you don't have to work anymore on your projects and programs, and you can just pull people together, and by doing so make people work together. Could the crisis help to solve a lingering problem or a challenge? So if you think about some of the long-standing problems, some resolve themselves now, kind of this thing of should we hot desk or should we have an office? What about travel costs, home office, flexi hours? So of course those things we're almost forced to think about, but maybe there's some other things that as leaders we have to face in the organization, and that this crisis can help us. Use the time to learn and evaluate. So again, in the NGO, we often don't have time to do M&E, but we all know why it's important, not just for the donors, but also for ourselves to learn and understand. And this is actually a time where some of your staff might actually not be so busy because they can't go out anymore. So it's a time to maybe number crunch, to collect those stories, those evidence, those things that really show that your work over the past few years has had a big impact. Innovate, so it's a time to think about new things and about questioning your TOC stands for theory of change. So many organizations, many NGOs copy and paste their theory of change kind of for the next proposal and the next strategy. And I think it's a good time to actually think about, does the pathway to change that we're proposing really lead to change? So how can we still enable change by continue doing our work? So so that's kind of a time in crisis that's a good opportunity to do that. The next one is on thoughtful, frequent communication. So it's this finding the right balance of being able to communicate, but then also to not overload people. I found this word brutal honesty, incredible hope. I found it while I was doing some reading, and I thought that was so great, because brutal honesty speaks to really tell people what's happening in your organization. Be honest about the funding, about things that, if nothing happens, how many months you have to go. Also tell them about other things that are happening in the background, but then also the aspect of credible hope. So it's not to be over optimistic, but to actually show them that that you think that the organization will make it, and that you think if you stick together and you do it in a good way, that you can get through that. So it's kind of the balance to find as a leader, but to do both. And the next point is very similar: confidence combined with realism. So portray the confidence in your communication that you think you will get through that, but with realism. So there's people that are so over optimistic and just at the beginning of probably also of COVID-19 said we will do it and we can do it. And then 2 months down the line, in 3 months, you thought, oh, then, the cheering kind of stops. And so it's kind of a measured response of showing confidence that you can make it. So those 2 points really speak to your staff and to your organization. But then the next point, engage your funders and stakeholders. And I hope, of course, that all of you that work with your funders have done that by now, and not just on the topic of sending and be now working all from home, but to really engage your funders and what's happening in your organization. Let them know what are the changes, to ensure that they understand what it means that you now had to, what the impact of COVID-19 on your organization. Keep it simple and brief. So we've probably over the last few months listened to a few grand speeches, but overall it's actually not the time to burden people with long speeches. It's kind of simple, brief, and rather a bit frequent and thoughtful, as I mentioned earlier. Become comfortable with ambiguity and chaos. So that's probably the most difficult point, but it's it's something you kind of, maybe you also like me, write your to-do list in the morning, and in these times you have to maybe rewrite your to-do list 3 times a day, but it's part of the it's an ongoing struggle. So you have to navigate point to point. And you as a leader have to do an ongoing pause, assess, anticipate, act cycle. So it's not long M&E processes, but it's really about take a breath, think again, act, and in an ongoing cycle, so that this ambiguity and chaos can be managed well. Show vulnerability, so you don't have all the answers, and leaders that portray that are often actually not, don't come across as authentic, because we all have our vulnerabilities and we all don't have all the answers. So it's a good point to also involve your staff and seek answers. And I think that, again, also creates confidence, because people find it much more credible if leaders show that they don't have all the answers. And my last point on the on leading in time of uncertainty is that you have to make decisions at some point. And so you seek input, you try and get information from as many sources as possible. Then you take a decision, and you have to accept from the onset that you will make mistakes, because in this time, and also in any crisis, you will never have all the information and all the data that you would need to make the correct decision. But then when you take a decision, it needs to be a decision that's clearly communicated, and that people can see that you that you made a decision, that it's communicated throughout. It's not something that sits in between, in particular because people are now mostly working from home. Communication has to be spelled out, has to be communicated. There is nothing like in the corridor talk anymore, so people don't hear about things. They really are dependent on your communication. So so those are the 6 points I thought I just wanted to quickly make around authentic leadership and of leading in time of uncertainty. And I found this quote, I really like that. So it's I thought it's kind of a nice way of where we at. So there are those who can work with ambiguity and those who are frozen by it. Some people need the route map, and others want to throw away the map and say, let's go and see where the sea takes us. And I think many of us were even forced to throw the map away. But that it also grants big opportunities if you can throw the map away at times and sail out and find your way. So now I've spoken a bit about the leading in time of uncertainty. And in my title, I added agile and adaptive management to it. So I'm just going to give you 2 definitions. I don't know, maybe some of you or maybe most of you are familiar with those concepts. Agile management comes actually from large IT projects and speaks about breaking large projects down into more manageable tasks and tackle them in the IT language is called short iterations or sprints. It allows teams to be better equipped to quickly change direction and focus. And adaptive management is really about the emphasis to change with the environment and to learn from doing. So, and be more flexible, adaptable, focused on learning. And it has been applied in international development, even also in community development. The USA, WWF, DFID, but as I said, also smaller projects, community development have applied this concept. Those concepts come from the private sector. And I'm not a fan of saying you have to be like the private sector as NGOs or NPOs, even because I believe that NPOs have certain characteristics that are really important. But I do believe there are things that we can take away for NGOs that also help again in uncertainty and are almost like little tools that will help us to adapt faster. But before I move on, maybe just a quick poll. Bruce, can you just pop the poll? It's just a question about if you've heard of agile management, adaptive management before. Okay, there we go. Thanks, Bruce. So just click on the poll. A few seconds. Have you heard of agile and adaptive management before? Have you used it in your practice, in your organization? Let's see what comes up. Okay, great. I see a big mix here. A few more seconds. See, thanks. A few more people, okay. Let's wait 2 more seconds. Okay, I think we can end the polling now. So people have heard of it, that's almost 50-50. 16% said I think so. And then have you used those practices? So 50% saying no, 30 maybe, and 23 saying yes. So thank you for that. That's great. So when we later have a discussion, it's fantastic. But also fantastic to hear from some of you how you experience both with those practices and using those. Okay, so my last slide before I'll have a short conversation with my guest today is, there you go. Yeah, there we go. What are the takeaways for NGOs? And I'm now talking specifically about the adaptive and agile management practices. I've just developed those short takeaways because, I mean, people who have worked with those concepts know they're huge concepts and paradigms, so we can do whole courses around adaptive management and agile management. So I thought of just quickly giving you a few pointers of what comes out of those theories or those approaches, and that could be used in your NGO work in crisis, but also potentially in projects or other times when it might be useful for you when you could apply those. So if you remember, the agile management had these short cycles, so small cycles, and they look very similar to our, I think, normal NGO project cycles. The idea is just that they're much shorter, and they have a component which is not very common in an NGO world, is testing. And of course, I understand that development and huge change and attitudinal change, those are not things that you can do in short cycles. But the whole cycle of monitoring and learning, so you see I haven't made a mistake. I know it's normally M and E, but in this instance I called it M and L because this whole cycle of monitoring and learning could, in many instances, smaller. So I've worked with a number of NGOs on, and small elements of their projects could be much faster assessed, look at the numbers, learn, change, and move on. And those are often smaller elements in bigger projects that then will help the bigger picture of change. Data is key. So I know that we often think in NGOs that M&E is such a burden and it's really cumbersome. But if you think about data as something exciting, then it could be great also for your work and for your projects. And those management practices speak a lot about data and information. And I think with more and more apps and technology becoming available, lots of NGOs could also move beyond just collecting data of number of participants, but many other things that then could inform your work and transform your work. Work with your staff to embrace ambiguity and complexity. I know that working in development, and especially also if you work a lot in the field and work in communities, it is quite often a complex task, and it's not easy. But within organizations, there's often the challenge for people to hold complexity. So to understand that, things change, don't happen linear, and that there are so many factors at play. And so it's great if it almost becomes a mantra, and you as leaders in your organization could help work on those concepts and challenge complexity. So to not think linear, but to think in complex ways. Beneficiary-centered, again, it's probably something that you almost tired of because your donors ask that, and everyone says you should focus on your beneficiaries. But what I mean here is that, if in the private sector you talk about clients and they test something or they look at your products, it's maybe not exactly the same, but I think we should spend sometimes, we should more often spend time of really asking our beneficiaries if it makes a difference. And sometimes if you not ask them, also spend time assessing the immediate environment if what we do and what we implement is really making the difference that we hope it will make. Process clarity. So I've also worked for a long time at NGOs, and there's a lot of these processes are kind of, we all know how it works here. And of course, I understand that we can't write down every process in an organization on a chart and create thick documents. But I think if sometimes it's at an NGO, there would be more clarity on, on how a decision is made or how you get from A to B, that would help a lot and avoid a lot of the chit chat and sometimes the challenges that happen within organizations. Develop a relationship with your donors. Again, many of you hopefully have that, but I also still meet a lot of NGOs that literally just have a relationship where they send the report, send the grant agreement, but then don't really have a relationship. And a relationship means that you're able to pick up the phone and have a conversation. Because if you want to, for example, now use some of the adaptive and agile management practices, it's time to have a conversation with your donors, because I also understand that specifically in the NGO world, it's not just up to you to change the way how you run projects. Your donors play a vital role in that, but you might be surprised that there are actually a number of donors open to this type of managing projects and doing things. And so maybe it would be interesting to engage your donors and start talking to them. How could you be more agile in your delivery and not so locked in, and basically being able to move out of kind of this results framework that basically just walk from A to B to C and leave not much room for flexibility. Communication, I think don't have to say much about it. And then flexibility, that's again something that I think, like the ambiguity and complexity, is not just something about flexi work hours or being more flexible, but it's really to challenge the organization to think in more flexibility terms. So if you start with finance and operations, so it's not about, for example, saying that we're not going to follow the rules and the policies. It's what's the flexibility within the policies, and start for other people also start thinking what's the flexibility to, if we have a certain process, if we have a certain theory of change, if we have a certain way of how we have run a model or thing for how many years, that we can now start changing it around and being more flexible, doing things shorter, and to almost have that also as a working principle as an organization. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share with you about agile and adaptive management. It's quite obviously, it was probably very ambitious of me to think to talk about this in a short presentation, but yeah, I mean, you're welcome to also contact me and we can have further discussions about the concept. I've invited today guests. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And I have invited someone who is not from an NGO. Her name is Kaashifah Beukes. And she's leading a large-scale project that has major developmental impact. So it's not completely a private sector entity, and it combines infrastructure and development. But I will let her to explain what she actually does. Before I start asking her some questions, I'm going to introduce her. So Kaashifah is passionate about inclusive delivery that makes a difference. As one of the handful special economic zones in South Africa, Kaashifah leads the SBIDZ team on complex strategic and operational matters to deliver value to its shareholder, the Western Cape government, and stakeholders alike. Kaashifah has been with the SBIDZ, sorry, it stands for Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone, since 2014, and now serves as the CEO of the SBIDZ LC, SOC Ltd, to say the full name. Kaashifah is responsible and accountable to the board of directors for the management of the company and delivery of the SBIDZ's mandate and operationalization strategy. Kaashifah holds a BSc in civil engineering and an MBA from the Graduate School of Business at UCT. She hails from Port Elizabeth in the Eastern Cape. So welcome, Kaashifah. There we are.
Hi, Carolin.
Hi, nice to have you. Thanks for taking the time. Can you please explain to your audience what does SBIDZ stand for and what is exactly that the SBIDZ does?
Thank you. Thank you for having me and welcome to everyone. Thank you for your presentation also. I was also making notes on that. So the Saldanha Bay IDZ, the Industrial Development Zone, is one of a few special economic zones across the country. Some of you might be from, so maybe just to locate Saldanha Bay, it's up the west coast. It's about an hour and a half outside of Cape Town. Very familiar, maybe to more people, would be the town of Langebaan, which is just to Saldanha Bay.
Okay. Thank you.
And so what we do is we're establishing the special economic zone in and around the port of Saldanha, which is the bay in the area. I see there's comments on the sound is bad, so I'm just going to try to improve my sound. And
yeah,
hopefully that would work.
Yeah, I think it's a bit shaky, so it's kind of sometimes loud and soft.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I might need to move over to the headphones.
Yeah, I think that might be better if you have.
Sorry.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, so we're the operator of the zone, and we have a mandate to establish and operate the zone, and a lot of the work that we do is attracting investment into the zone and into the area then.
Okay, thanks. Okay, you able to plug in the earphones? Do that?
Yeah. Let's just see.
Because it goes from loud to soft, and I think.
So with working from home, my headphones are connected to my iPad, which is, you know, all of these mobile devices that you have to deal with now.
Yes. Okay, so maybe in the meantime, I'll just ask the next question. So when COVID-19 hit, what happened at the SBIDZ, and what was and is the impact of the pandemic?
So when the pandemic hit and it became clear, well, before the start of the national lockdown, I think we decided as a company then to institute work from home arrangements automatically from the 20th of March. And but then when the national lockdown came about, all of our activities on site had to come to an end. So we're largely in our infrastructure phase, so construction phase. So all our construction projects had to be suspended. And also of the operational tenants that we have, they couldn't operate their businesses. And the port was also closed for a period until the port reopened as well. We actually also do a lot of learning programs, skills development programs as part of our work, and all of those also had to be suspended with the lockdown. Obviously quite detrimental to our upskilling initiatives and our objective of getting people ready for the economic opportunities that come from the zone.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I'm sure that was quite major considering the size of the project. So if you now think back 5.5 months, what was the first thing you did as a CEO when you heard of the lockdown, or when it became clear that this will happen, or this is happening actually? Yeah, I think it's better.
Okay. So the first thing that we did, we're a small team, so we're about 50 people in the organization, and we had a big, like a Zoom company call just before we instituted the work from home arrangements on the 20th of March. And just in prepping to have that Zoom call was an exercise in agility and adaptive management, because we had never had I mean, I don't think many South African organizations have work from home policies as, standard. We certainly didn't. So, consulting with the board as to, so then what, legally in terms of, HR and all of that, and then ethically, as well as what to anticipate what government would allow and not allow. And, so on that first Zoom call with the whole of the company saying that we're going to close down some of the offices and everybody needs to work from home, and we're, getting you with data and you have all of your programs on your laptops. So, we're going to have to take a stab at this as we go along over the next few weeks, and please be patient with us. If you have any issues or any problems with working or your home environment, then please talk to us, and it really became, so we had, every 2 weeks we had these big company calls, just checking in with each other. So that's one of the first things that we did. Then the second thing we did is, so maybe to structure it, we took a four-part sort of action plan. The first part was safeguarding employees. And so what I was talking about, the regular Zoom calls, giving them clarity on how they can work and what is going to happen in their work. The second part was safeguarding our customers, because some of our tenants were operational and they couldn't work. So they asked for rental relief. So they pay us rent, because we're operating an estate, and negotiations with that, so that at the end of the day, you don't want the company to go under because of what is, because of abiding by the law. Also what we did with our customers is we did a survey of just the top 20 sort of the more mature, more imminent projects, or those that are operational tenants already, and asked them questions of, okay, so how has COVID hit you? Like a few weeks into it. Once also the relief measures were advertised and were made known, have you accessed the relief measures from the government? What's your experience been? What are your risks? What are you seeing as changes in your marketplace, with your customers, and also with your staff, and in looking at how you might have to change your operations? Obviously at the time, and this was over the month of April and May, over the months of April and May, there were a lot of unknowns at the time, because we all didn't know how this thing was going to pan out. Every day there was new data coming in. And I think that really helped. One of the points that you said about, beneficiary focused. So our customers are one part of our beneficiaries. And so to really, what COVID has allowed us to do is form more closer relationships with them. Having weekly conversations with them now as to, and I think it also made it easier because there's less commuting. On a weekly basis, going through what their concerns are, any actions that need to be followed up, any risks that are coming onto their horizon and on our horizon. Then the third part of our action plan was safeguarding our stakeholders. We are a state-owned company, so our customers are not just our tenants. We have a whole diverse stakeholder, cohort that we engage with and serve, being it the local business associations and fraternity in Saldanha and in the West Coast, to community, to government stakeholders, to the business industry, as I said before. And one of the things that we did in that regard was we initiated newsletters, so from the company. So keeping our stakeholders updated updated as to our progress, because there's also quite a lot of expectation on the IDZ to the economic growth of the area. So keeping them updated as to any volatility in the markets that you see, you know, things that are risks that are coming out there in the market, and then how do they actually translate in Saldanha. One of the other things that we did is just before the lockdown, we had converted one of our old site camps into a SMME place of support, which we call a co-lab, so a collaboration lab. We run it on a no-fee basis, so SMMEs in the area can come and rent a space to hold a meeting, do some administration work. They're offered free Wi-Fi and scanning and printing facilities. It is because part of our mandate is to grow the economy and to also transform the economy, and as you said, inclusive growth. And it had to be closed down because of COVID. And once the relief measures were made known, which were all online, many of the SMMEs came to us and said, we can't actually access them because we don't have internet at home, as that is required to access these online relief measures. So in working with the Department of Health and the local authority there, we reopened the co-lab on a very limited services, strict social distancing and hygiene and safe way. And we, in the hardest part of the lockdown for the remainder of level 5, we estimate that we had about 10 SMMEs coming in there every day, accessing the internet, download, and also once the relief measure and the urgency of their need was addressed, what we found is that they're now using the co-lab to do their own learning. So they sign up for webinars, and they're having, you know, they're improving their learning, but also they're doing business. So they're using the co-lab as what it was meant to do, to have virtual meetings now with tenants and so forth. The last element of our action plan and how we responded to COVID was finally then looking after the business. And based on all of that information from our employees, from our customers, from our stakeholders, you know, and also the changing dynamic in South Africa, we really sort of re-looked at our strategic plans, and we put more emphasis on, you know, I want to say a survive and thrive plan. So using that data from the customers and we asked them the question of what would you need to accelerate your investment or your business growth? So we have a very good idea now of the levers that we have available to us in order to, you know, sustain the business, but also still, you know, serve our customers. The other thing that we did is we have now an occupational health and safety advisor who advises us and our tenants to ensure that on COVID-related matters. Because the point is you need to keep these businesses open so that they can keep operational and that they can keep employing people and doing their business. And so we've brought in that resource to offer to them small and big business so that we can ensure that, you know, we support them to keep their business open. On a personal level, an idea that I was toying with for a while before COVID was, and what actually COVID actually helped with is us as SBIDZ, we operate in a very complex and ambiguity is well, you know, known because there's so many factors in operating the SBIDZ that one has to take into consideration. So what we've actually started now is an SBIDZ CEO support network. So most of the CEOs from the SBIDZ have come together and just talk about like their leadership experience, you know, pre and post COVID, the things learned from each other, so that you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. Be a sounding board to what your concerns are and what you're dealing with, and just support each other through this ambiguity that we're all facing.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. Wow, that's really quite a lot of input and great points. So I think you made it very practical. Some of the things I was talking about also now at the end, to have a support, kind of that for me counts very much as self-care and also seeking and giving empathy basically to fellow leaders and people in the same position. So that's really great. So my last question would just be, is there anything, I mean, now it's obviously half year into the crisis, we know it's going to be for a long time. Some of the strategies you have outlined are already kind of set out to obviously aid through the next months. Do you feel that you're better prepared for crises now, or is there anything else you want to maybe share with the community that's today with us here?
I hope we are better prepared. I live in incredible hope, as you say, because we have put things in place. What this has allowed for is to have, frank, open, honest, conversations with each other of or just and also give feedback more quickly. Like something isn't working, or this isn't working, or I have an idea. Maybe we should do this differently. So I do believe that as an organization, we are better prepared. The one thing that sustains us, and I think is in the mindset that we've had to adopt, is that we, you have a forecast and you have a plan. But what COVID has taught us is about, we need to monitor our assumptions that we made in the plan, not monitor the output of the plan, because the outputs are going to change because everything else is changing. So our assumptions that we made in the plan originally, and whether they still have any meaning. I think that's probably one of the biggest lessons that we've had to learn. And then always, what COVID is doing to people's lives. I just over this past week, I'm very grateful that none of our staff have gotten seriously ill. There have been 1 or 2 cases, but there have been deaths in the extended families. And, it's shown the human, and I think also the Zoom, the virtual remote, you have people now in your home, access to your home. They can see everything that's around you and hear all the noises and the kids making a noise and everything else. So I think it's made us a closer team, more authentic with each other, and more patient with each other. One of the things also that I forgot to mention, I was meaning to mention, when I asked everybody in the company to talk to me about what are their concerns. And the emails that I got back and the feedback that I got back from people really spoke to, their very human concerns, and about childcare, about income, about healthcare, about security and safety, about the humanitarian relief that's needed, and the plight of their fellow man. And one of the things that I instituted was that we now have an employee wellness provider. So that's not only open to our employees, but to their immediate family. It's a 24/7 service. And I'm hoping that, people have a conduit, besides the organizational frame, of sharing and getting the support they need to get through this, because this will be with us for a while. And there's only so much I can do as a leader, with my team. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, that's very powerful. Yeah, and again, it speaks to the point of really, you know, as you said just now, there's only so much you can do. You're only one person, but I think what you've shared, you've done a lot, and you've actually really been very thoughtful about your interventions, and not just from the, you know, getting the work done perspective, but also really how to care for people. Yeah, in this regard. So thank you for that. I think it's been really great.